Welcome to Success Redefined with Dr. Toni Warner. I'm Dr. Toni, mom of five, psychotherapist, author, and mentor. Here, you're going to find insightful discussions spanning science, psychology, and soul as the personal and professional meet, and we explore the intersection of what really matters. So success can be redefined with connection, healing, and fulfillment in mind. In this episode, we're going to talk about sensuality and how it interacts with our sense of success in various aspects of our lives, especially as ambitious achievers. I'm joined today by Eleanor, also known as Elle Hamilton Hole, who is a licensed therapist and embodied movement instructor. Pretty cool, huh? She's based out of New Orleans, and when she started her social work career and her pole dancing careers, she first thought that they were very separate, but she soon came to realize that they were deeply connected. She shares a bit about that in this episode today. Movement became her tool for reclamation, reclaiming her self-care, meaningful relationships, her voice, and so on and so forth. And so, inspired by her own journey from healing through things like trauma and depression and anxiety, she started to implement some of this movement approach with her clients. I think this is a pretty fascinating conversation that is really going to bring up some stuff for each of us. But I think it presents an opportunity for us to explore ourselves in an inspiring way with some refreshing perspective. Let's get started. I have Eleanor Hamilton Hole with us today, who's bringing in the mental health piece with the sensuality piece. And I'm very on board with this conversation because my doctorate's in human sexuality. And I think it's a topic that some of us have taboo feelings around, sensitive feelings around, maybe some ruffled feathers around, or a lot of questions around and aren't sure kind of where to go or who to ask or how to entertain them. So what the heck does all of this have to do with success is part of what we're going to talk about today. How can sensuality be related to success? And that's a good question. So we're going to dive into that today. Eleanor, I'm so glad you're here to help us do that.
Yes, I'm so excited to be here.
Yes. Can you tell us a little bit about who you are? So a little bit about what you do, where you're from, and maybe even what brought you to this work in the first place.
Yes, so my name is Eleanor. I'm a therapist and embodied movement coach based in New Orleans, Louisiana. Born and raised here. I did leave for a little bit for schooling, but came back. So saying New Orleans is a very unique and beautiful place. And if you've ever been here, probably gotten a taste literally of that. So my journey probably started in 2005 with Hurricane Katrina. I was in high school at the time, and I was one of the refugees, survivors of Katrina, relocated to Texas for some time. Obviously, it was a very traumatic event for myself, losing my house, just the changes the city underwent, seeing the destruction when over 80% of the city was underwater. So that was sort of a very in my face lesson about trauma and seeing how it impacted everyone around me, my community. New Orleans is a very community oriented place. So it's a very tight knit. And when everyone dispersed and you're hearing all these stories about everything that happened, there was a real mental health crisis after, which was very visible to us in high school. There was a lot of loss by suicide and things like that in the city following Katrina. So that's probably what started me on my journey towards wanting to be a mental health practitioner. It was always a goal of mine to go get the education and come back and help heal the trauma in this area. We have a lot of trauma outside of Katrina as well in this region. So that kind of started that journey. In 2011, I graduated from undergrad. I was living in San Francisco and working there. And it was my first full-time, I say full-time, but it was really 3 jobs because it was San Francisco. So 3 jobs in mental health. And at the end of each day, I was worn out. I was exhausted. I didn't really have the skills and tools yet to process everything I was hearing. I was working with high trauma individuals. I was working in San Francisco General Hospital, if anyone's familiar with it. It was sort of a catch-all for a lot of the mental health issues in the city. And so one day I got a Groupon email about a pole dancing class. And I was like, what is this? I've never heard it, or I think I've heard of it before via pop culture, but I've never done it before. And I was like, okay, I can do a Groupon and can go to my first class. So I go to my first class after a long day of work and done, like hook, line, and sinker, sold. The instructor did a demo dance of the intro routine at the end of class, and I was like, that I want to do that. That is that she just had so much presence. She was so connected. It was so powerful. And I think after moving through so many um, masculine dominated, like undergraduate, the hospital, and masculine energy is fabulous. It's great, but I like to balance it with that feminine. It was kind of my first time realizing how powerful feminine energy can be. And yeah, done. I was signed up for every class after that. And yeah, that's 2011. So I started teaching that in 2013. And so I've been in kind of exploring the somatics and the embodiment practice behind pole dancing, sensual movement, reclaiming your sensual self and your sensual power for about the last decade. And then, of course, my therapy practice has grown and also started to incorporate some somatics into it as well. So it's kind of like wove together as they grew at the same time.
Isn't that so cool though, how there's the unexpected that can kind of pop itself into your life. And if you say yes to it, if you're willing to try something new or maybe get a little spontaneous or adventurous, the doors, the avenues that it can take you down. Because part of what I heard you saying was you were passionate about the work, but you were also working in an environment that had an emotional heaviness to it, right? An emotional heaviness to it. And you weren't feeling equipped to manage all of that emotional heaviness. And so in some ways it can be taken home with you, right? Like in a really heavy bag, you just kind of add bricks and add bricks and add bricks. But
Yeah.
pole dancing was like an avenue for some fun. And when you have fun and you enjoy yourself, it's like taking a brick out or chipping a bit off of a brick. And it makes it a little less heavy, not less significant, right? The work is still so significant. The trauma is still significant. The impacts that can be made is still so significant, right? We're not minimizing or diminishing that, but you're able to, sounds like, show up in a different way because you let yourself have fun in a completely unexpected avenue. Is that accurate, or would you describe it differently?
Oh, that's so accurate. Yeah, it was like the reintroduction of play to being an adult, because we get so serious. Things get so serious. And these are very serious topics, but you can't walk through life. Like you said, like that. I love that analogy of like the heavy bag with all the bricks in it. Because then, yeah, you start to have your own secondary trauma, your own symptoms start showing up in your life. And so finding a way, an outlet to express all that, to play, and then that just started shifting all these things for me because I was like building a new community with everyone who was going to all these pole classes and we see each other all the time. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, I got to go to sleep early because I want to, have energy at pole class tomorrow. So it starts to, make those shifts where you just start like the avalanche of things that kind of help lighten the load of those bricks.
I love that. I love that. You made such a clear connection there so quickly of what the heck sensuality has to do with success and how they can feed into one another, how they can intersect. It's like, well, if you allow yourself some play and some fun, you said it was a reintroduction to play as an adult. I loved that.
Mm-hmm.
A reintroduction to play as an adult brings up a lot of stuff for us. Who has time? Who's time for that? Right? Like,
yes.
Was that something that you came up against, trying to find time or set time aside or hold boundaries with work, 3 jobs, all that you were doing, and commit to this other avenue of fun and play and embracing your sensuality?
Yeah, I would say, it's interesting because I would say boundaries are something I've struggled with my whole life. That has been, I didn't even know that was a topic. I grew up in a family, my mom's an adult child of an alcoholic. And so, that legacy of alcoholism just proliferated in my family. And so boundaries weren't really a thing, or if someone did set a boundary, they were shamed or knocked down. So I would say, if anything, pole was the first time that I felt like I could put a boundary down. Like okay, work wants me to stay late and work on this project, but I've got pole class tonight and I'm not missing it. So y'all gonna have to wait. I will do this tomorrow. I'll crunch this data tomorrow. So if anything, that was the first invitation for me to start setting boundaries. And I would say it was easier back then because I was in my 20s, I didn't have kids, I was single, I had a lot more time than I do now, but I have my pole, as you can see. And even now with 2 kids, I own a business. I still make time every week to get on it because the cost of not doing it, of not getting to engage with that is greater.
I was going to ask you that. I was going to say, what helps you stay committed to that? And I don't mean commitment in the obligatory sense, right? Which we can so easily get pulled into as folks that are really passionate about our career, or as an ambitious woman, or as someone who just is really driven and really, we can so quickly get pulled into this sense of commitment, obligation. So we have to do it no matter what, right? Like that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about here, like this is something that it sounds like you feel nourished by, you feel replenished by, you feel like a deep connection with. And so you're wanting to commit to that because it feels so good to you. What helps you to continue that, to sustain that? Because I do think that's hard for many of us who have a very generous heart or are in healthcare and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me was the realization of the difference between when I am making that time for myself, and in my context, it's going to pole class, but I realize it's not going to be the same thing for everybody. But when I go to class consistently, like once or twice a week, ideally, I'm a much better therapist. I'm a much better mom. I'm a much better partner. My fuse goes from like this to like this. And I'm able to stay present just because I had that time for myself. So I think that realization of, oh, like that reframing around it. This is not me like being selfish and taking time when I could be, I should be serving other people, but reframing that around like, oh no, if I take care of myself and water myself with this, then I show up so much better. And and because I'm interested in somatics, I will learn lessons through my body in class that I then turn around and talk about with clients because I've had the time to process it and think about it. And it's so much more effective than me just sort of talking abstractly or, about a theory. It makes it feel more lived in, I think, too. Makes it more accessible.
Yeah. You mentioned a couple of times that you bring somatics kind of into your work. How have you done that over the years, bringing this somatic experience? So we're talking, body and sensations type of experience from your life in a way that it's enriched you into some of your work that you're doing with the folks that you work with.
Yeah, yeah. So it kind of has two faces depending on which business you're looking at. So I started a whole coaching business that's embodied movement, specifically around sensual and pole dance or creative movement around there. I run workshops around that. And so it's really powerful because we'll meet up. There'll be a goal of the workshop. For instance, at a boundaries workshop. So we learned a little sequence on the pole. We did a warm up, grounding, connecting with our bodies. We did a sequence on the pole, and in those we did activities. Like, for instance, I gave everyone masking tape, and they had to draw a boundary around their pole, and they had to like dance in it, like stay in it, move in it, and like we sat down and we processed it. Like, what did that feel like? How did it feel to have that boundary? Was it restrictive? Did it feel freeing? What came up for you as you were going through that? Which was really powerful, and then you get to see it and they get to feel it. So that's been a really cool experience. So that's more the coaching side where I actually do bring more of the pole in. And then in therapy, it's much more. I completed the embodied recovery from eating disorders training. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's really good. It's if anyone's interested who's listening, she kind of weaves in polyvagal and sensory motor and somatic experiencing. And so that's much more of kind of what you'll picture like grounding exercises, maybe reaching and extending through the arm and feeling how that feels, resourcing the body through like adjusting the posture and breath and things like that too. So it's a little bit more subtle in therapy, I think. And it can be a little bit more loud in coaching just because the goals are different. But I am completing my sex therapy certification right now in the process. I'm so excited. So I have some ideas maybe in the future about places this could go as that practice deepens too.
That is so exciting. I love how you presented a bit of a paradox here of as we embrace our sensuality from this place of play, and you didn't use the word pleasure, but I'm going to insert it from this place of play and pleasure and fun. And we can do that with this paradox of having boundaries and freedom of flow.
Mhm.
And how mind-blowing that is to so many of us who have been so accustomed to like go, 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 do, like checklist, and just really hyper focused on the conventional measurement for success, which is get things done, push yourself really hard, bootstraps it, blah, blah, blah. And so the freedom of flow part, it's like it's hard to find a place for it. How do you fit those pieces together?
Mhm. In my personal life?
Whichever one you want to start with.
Yeah, because I was immediately thinking, and I'm sure we all know people, friends like this, family members like this, who are falling out of connection with their partner or partners because we get so focused on that go, 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 got to get things done, got to get the list, got to make the lunch boxes, got to go to the bank, got to do all these things. And then we sort of lose that spaciousness
Mm.
to, yeah, to explore pleasure with our partner. And even sometimes I think too, and this is interesting because I am seeing this kind of pop up in the pole community, which is its own community with its own life. We are getting so focused on the outcome that
Yeah.
we're losing the flow. We're losing the play in the process. And I see that in relationships like that. Like I'm so focused on getting things done, I'm exhausted by the end of the day. I can't show up and play with my partner, whether that is sexual or not. And I'm seeing that in the pole community in this like over focus on Instagram. That's a big issue. And everyone's so focused on like they want to come to one class and get something so that they can video it and share it on Instagram for likes,
Mm.
rather than like enjoying the process of learning your body, playing, getting that sense of freedom. And I think, as you said, that kind of happens with sex too, right? Like we get so focused on orgasms, we forget about, did you connect with your partner? What did it feel like? Was it pleasurable? Like there's a million ways it can be rewarding without it just being about the orgasm.
And so you might discover this in your sex therapy certification exploration. But one of the things that we talk about in the human sexuality field is sensate focus. Have you come across that yet?
No, I'm excited.
You will. And it touches on what you were just sharing is we are so accustomed to this outcomes, and how that's supposed to be the the thing that tells us we're successful. And yes, there's a time and a place for that. But as far as us actually feeling successful, that fulfilling, satisfying sense of internal success, it really winds up backfiring. I mean, so many, right? So many of us have burnt out, myself included. I have definitely burnt out twice in my life because so hyper focused on the outcome space. And so sensate focus in the realm of sexuality and sensuality really has a bunch of different exercises and activities that encourage exploration for fun, for play, for pleasure, and for communication to open that flow of exchange and energy between, self and partner or partners. And how different that is than
Mhm.
focusing on, oh, I need to get them to orgasm, or I need to get to orgasm, or I just need to finish this, right? Because I got X, Y, and Z to do.
Yes,
And
yes.
it changes things. And it's also very uncomfortable in the beginning if you're so used to focusing, right? Like on the outcomes, to focus instead on the experience
Yeah.
of it, and how that deepens connection, while all at the same time it does open up more vulnerability for us, don't you think?
Oh, yes. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, there's something you said in there that really made me think of something. Oh, it'll come back to me. But yes, it's a whole practice and vulnerability. Because right now I'm calling it my goo era right now, where I'm really, and I'm talking about this on Instagram a lot. I'm like, I just want to be like goo and not put too much into the outcome and just sort of enjoy and play with the process. But yeah, that is a vulnerable place, especially when we live in such a culture that is like, show me the money. Like, where's the outcome? Like, give me the outcome and let's get moving. So it can be really vulnerable, and it brings up a lot of scary things for us too. And I would say this shows up, and that's why I love this podcast, is Success Redefined, because like, this is what I was thinking. It was like when we get caught up on those outcomes, they tend to never be enough. And I'm sure you've had that experience too, where it's like, okay, I got the thing. Oh, but that doesn't really count. Now I need this thing, and so we get kind of caught in that loop, and like what you're saying, it kind of backfires and creates more problems versus learning to enjoy and play in the process. And I think that's really where coaches and therapists are really helpful, is like partnering with you in that vulnerability, and being like, okay, it's that attachment piece. You're going to go out there and be vulnerable, but you're not going to do it alone. We're in this together. You're brave. You got this. And like having that community built up around it can be really, really helpful and really meaningful.
So true. And I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, oh my gosh, I could relate so many different aspects of my life as a parent, as a partner, as a student, as a therapist, as a professional, like so many different facets of myself to this topic of like creating these limitations by becoming too focused on outcomes, and how I have done that in one way or another in the past. And that it's not bad or wrong. It's just when we get caught up in it, where we're like that, you dangle the carrot in front of the racing horse or in front of the rabbit, and just keeps going. You just get like you get exhausted at some point, and it's lonely.
Mm-hmm.
It's lonely. But for me, one of the things that was really big for me, even just thinking about it still to this day, can still bring tears to my eyes, is how the fear of vulnerability really is and still was and is still one of the areas that I have to keep coming back to, because at a very young age, I internalized that I needed to be the strong one. I needed to be the one that got things done, right? And I wasn't, I wouldn't say I was necessarily cut off from my sensuality, but it was limited because I would only allow myself to experience it within myself.
Yeah.
Right. Because it was so vulnerable to experience it with others, to let others in that deep, intimate way where I'm actually really open with them. And that just contributed to that self-fulfilling prophecy of I have to do it all on my own. It's all on me. I had to be super independent. And it went on and on and on, and kind of replicated itself in these different parts of my life.
Yeah. Yeah. I can relate to that. And I was like, it's like, here's the honesty circle. Like, I feel the same way. And I think I was so scared of vulnerability. And for a lot of learned messages, right, from family, from culture, that I internalized a lot of those. And so for me, I've been sober for, oh God, I can't even, I've lost count. That's a good sign, right? 7 or 8 years at this point. I quit drinking. But for me, for a long time, drinking alcohol was my coping for that vulnerability, that vulnerability, that fear of being vulnerable. And especially when it came to connecting with other people, especially when it came with connecting with potential romantic partners. Oh, like I was like, the thought of going on a date sober would have terrified me. The thought of doing anything intimate sober would have terrified me. But like what you're saying, it ends up creating more of that same problem, because if you're inebriated the first time you have sex with someone, you don't really remember it and you're not present. And then you don't get that connection anyway. So then it kind of reinforces that message of, oh, it's not safe to be vulnerable because there was no connection. So yeah, I can relate to that.
It blunts things. And in the limiting, in that bluntedness, it is making it harder for us to experience the full expression of our sensuality, because sensuality, as social beings, we're social and emotional beings, right? So yes, it's great to be able to experience fun and play and pleasure within yourself. And also, when you can do that safely with someone else, not only does that expand your experience in general, but it it can deepen your own experience with yourself too. So it's like a two, it's out and in. If that
Yes.
makes sense.
Yes. Yeah. 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 Absolutely. That window of tolerance, right? Like just starts to slowly stretch. And then and that opens up more space for you and for other people. And then it gets easier as you keep going, I
Yes.
think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I want to normalize this a little bit. Yes,
Yeah.
it does get easier as you keep going, and there is no end, right? Like all at
Correct.
the same time. When I find myself um coming to the next level, so to speak, not that there's like a hierarchy of levels, but when I find myself coming to the next level of self-development or the next depth or the next layer, um, it is very often that I'm finding myself circling back around the same areas that have generally been a challenge in my life, but I'm coming at them from a different place with a deeper perspective, right? Like a better understanding, more equipped, and just ready for that next layer. So right now I'm pregnant with my fifth, and I'm very pregnant with my fifth. Like he could come any week now, anytime now, right? And
Yeah.
we're also in the middle of preparing for a home extension. And so we had to like move all of our stuff out of this one garage and put it in a different garage. And so I wanted to do it so bad because I'm like, the way I'll do it is going to be organized. And if my partner does it, he's not going to do it in an organized way. That's going to give me like all of the reasons why I need to get it done. But I couldn't get it all done before I was too big in my pregnancy to the point where like I just couldn't move these big things by myself anymore. And it was very hard for me to trust and lean into my partner and be like, okay, I have to trust that he can, like, not he can, but he will do this, and then it's going to be okay. I have to open myself up to not have to do it all
Yeah.
and allow him to support me. Even
Hmm.
now, like we've been married for almost 10 years.
Right. 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 And I would even add on to that, like it's not even just trusting that they're going to show up for you and do the thing, but it's also trusting that if they don't, we can figure it out. Right? Like I have the skills to go talk to them about it, right? Because I think we all know that like that's also a big barrier for people is when someone they feel like someone didn't hold up their end of the bargain or didn't show up for them, like voicing that that part, saying, feeling like it's okay to inhabit the space to say that and then figure it out together, even though it's messy. Yeah.
That's a good one. That's a good one. I have definitely noticed in these last several years as I've deepened practicing, like allowing that support from my partner and from other people in general in a deeper and deeper and deeper way,
Mhm.
is that I have this part of me that avoids confrontation, avoids conflict in my intimate circles. I am a pro mediator. I mean, in any professional situation, you can find me like I can handle like boom, boom, boom. I can help ease things. I can help open the lines of communication. Like, blah, blah, blah. Like I'm so good at that. But in my intimate circles, I didn't realize how averse I have been for my whole life, essentially. And so that's one of the layers, right, that I have been trying to become more aware of and practice deepening in. And that people might be like, what does this have to do with sensuality and sexuality, right? But sensuality isn't all about sex. It's
Mhm.
not all about intercourse, right? It's about us being able to experience, to notice, and to embrace all of these different senses within us and between us, right? The
Yeah.
inter and the intra. And this is part of that, like our relationships and feeling safe in them or not feeling safe in them and being able to communicate in them or not communicate in them. It all plays a part.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think too is because I struggled with that as well too. Like just that kind of almost people pleasing. For me, it was people pleasing. It was very much like, okay, no, I'm fine. I don't have a problem, but we're going to do what you want to do. Like we're good. And tying that back to sensual movement, practicing that on my own in the context of, again, for me, pole, but for it doesn't have to be that for anybody. Like, what are my boundaries where is the end range? Like how far does it feel to put my arm out to the right? And if I honor that, what comes next? What's the sensation around that? And that intimacy with self, I think, like, can I trust myself to know where those boundaries are first before I communicate with them? And then the empowerment that comes from that too, of like learning those skills for yourself, like watching your dance evolve over time. And at a certain point, like, not everyone has to do this, but I was wearing a bikini after I just had my babies, dancing in front of a room full of 20 people. And I was like, well, we're doing it. So, like, if I could do this, I can tell my friend that I'm sick of her showing up 10 minutes late all the time.
Mhm.
Mhm.
It's challenging ourselves in a different way.
Yeah. Mhm.
Mm.
Mhm. Yeah.
So if you were to describe sensuality, and what it means to you in the way that you view it, how would you do that?
Yeah. Yeah. And sensuality is, like, I think to your point, is so multifaceted. But for me, when I hear the word, I immediately go back to the root of the word, like the senses, and
Mhm.
tying into our five senses, and how do we connect to that is the feeling of our feet on the floor, seeing a beautiful sunset, or just seeing a tree blossoming. I mean, spring is sort of sprung here, so trees are blossoming everywhere. As I'm walking around, I'm like, oh, okay, I can smell the jasmine, I can see the flowers, I can feel the wind, right? Like really kind of bringing it down to the most basic. And that's something I try to tell my students too, because we get so focused on what's like, they use the word sensual, but I don't think they mean sensual. I think they mean like sexual or erotic. What it's titillating, like what movements can I make with my body that get a specific response to someone else, when actually it's the opposite. We need to connect with our senses. What feels good? What do I notice about the weight of my hand on the floor? How does that feel? How does it feel when I scrape my sock across the floor? Right? Like connecting into that internally first is going to actually give you the external expression of that without trying as hard, to be
Mhm.
honest.
And so for folks like my past self, and it sounds like perhaps your past self as well, who maybe have a part of them or a lot of them that are rolling their eyes right now and they're like, who has time for that? Right? Like, I have
Yeah.
kids to raise, I have a business to run, or I have people to lead, or I have X, Y, or Z that I have to do, that I have to get done. Like, in what way is slowing down going to help me get more things done? How is slowing down going to help me speed up, essentially? How would you speak to that from this framework that we're talking here with really bringing our sensuality to the forefront?
Right, right. You know what I think about a lot? Did you ever watch Parks and Rec, the
Mm-mm.
show? There was an episode where they were had a disagreement about the best way to motivate people. And one person was like, the best way to motivate people is by being positive. And the other one was like, no, the best way to motivate people is like the stick, like threaten them and tell them that if they don't do it, everything will fall apart. And they, in the episode, they basically test out that theory, and they find that the person who used the stick got the work done faster, but incorrectly. The person who used the carrot got the work done slower, but more correctly. In this case, it was like filing something. So like it was more easy to judge. And I think of that kind of, I mean, it's a TV show, it's a comedy, it's a funny episode, but I think of that lesson is pretty applicable to this, because we can beat ourselves up and be really hard on ourselves and constantly chase the next thing and think we're never enough and I'm not a good mom and I'm not a good partner and all these things. But we're rushing towards what? Because there's always going to be something else. So accepting that. But there's a lot of error along the way with that too. And when we're talking about our lives, those errors can be pretty big, like drinking too much, or being in a relationship with someone who doesn't support you, or engaging in way too much time on social media, comparing yourself to other people. So like those costs start to add up in a way that I don't think we give enough weight at first, until we hit a dead end with those, and then they're loud and obvious. Versus slowing down, paying attention to our sensuality. That's a whole power source that most of us don't tap into because of the culture we live in, especially if you identify as female or assigned female at birth or identify as femme, right? Like there's a lot of messaging around putting that away. So that's a whole extra like super juice power source you have access to, that's slowing down, actually getting things done in a way that feels good, feels right. And you'll know what that feels like because you'll have that strong relationship with your body. So when it lands there, you're like, oh yeah, that's the job, because I can feel like that feels like the one I should take. It feels aligned with where I'm going. It makes sense, sure, on paper, and my prefrontal cortex likes it too. But there's more parts of our brain than just the prefrontal cortex, right? There's a whole other lobes and parts and everything. So like getting access to the whole thing, I think creates a more aligned life with less problems in the long term.
Mm.
Mhm.
There's so many pieces of that I think we often don't think about, or, many folks are just not aware of. And as you were sharing that, what came back up for me was something you said a couple times earlier on in our conversation, was that being more present and the benefits that can come from when we and slow down really isn't the best terminology to use, I think, but I'm going to use it here for now. To slow down, we're able to be more present the more we practice slowing down. And the more present we can be, the more connected we can feel. Yes, to the earth, to ourselves, to our purpose, but within our relationships with others as well. Being able to be present, which we have to be if we're noticing our sensations, right? Our senses, our felt experience. It is an automatic practice of being present, being in the present. When we practice that more and more, we're able to rewire our brain and our nervous system, right? To do that more and more. But then we're able to just experience life more and more, deeper and deeper, rather than like, just get it done. Do we really want to go through life to just get it done? To what end?
Right. Mm-hmm.
I've had to remind myself that many times in the past, like, to what end? Like,
Yeah.
it's just going to be another thing.
Right. Right. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that, whoo, yes. Personally, I feel that. And then also professionally, I see that all the time because I'll work with people who are so busy running from something or towards something that they don't realize they already have the thing they're running towards. I see that come up a lot about finances, particularly with clients. Which I always think is funny. It's like sex and money are like the two most complicated topics no one wants to talk about. But people are like, I gotta get more money, I gotta get more money, I gotta get more money, without pausing and realizing they have money. Like their bills are paid, they've saved up for the next month. Like they're doing better than most people are. Um, but yes, yeah. And I was thinking about that personally because there was a time in my life when I was really struggling with a lot of these things. Oh, and like you said, they come up every new level. But like when I was really in the thick of figuring these out, that my movement was reflecting that because I went through this phase of I got to get the next trick. If anyone's not familiar with pole dancing, there's like the tricks, like the gymnastics kind of Olympic style pole, and then there's the much more true to its origins in the strip clubs, like dancey, flowy, kind of sensual version of it. And I got very caught up on this like tricks, Olympics, do, like go do. And I was pushing past my body cues. I kept showing up and drilling a specific move. It's called a shoulder mount. But basically, you put your shoulder on the pole and you just use your arms and your shoulder to flip upside down. Just drilling it because I was so focused on getting that move without like, for what? I don't know. I'm not like going to the Olympics with this. I don't know why I was so resolute that I ended up injuring myself. I actually ended up getting a shoulder tear, a labral shoulder tear. And then I had to quit all movement for 6 months because I injured myself. And that was a big wake up call for me of like, what am I doing this for? Why am I running from trick to trick? And of course, that's what I was doing in real life too. I was running from work project to work project to work project, trying to get that gold star like for what? Who and whose gold star? Who is it even for? Who's it from? What does it mean? And so reevaluating that was a big wake up call for me to slow down and go, okay, what do I actually want? And what do I want my life to actually look like and feel like every day? And not just constantly chasing the next thing.
Yeah.
Mhm.
How to incorporate an honoring and an awareness of our senses with our definition of success
Mhm.
without um, losing a momentum to, for lack of a better word, do what needs to be done or get done what needs to get done. I think that's something that comes up a lot. One of the things that I was worried about earlier on in my career when I started to notice like I was addicted to action, but I'm like, what is the alternative? Because stuff needs to get done. And if I lose my ambition, how's it going to get done? I don't want to not be productive. And it felt like all or nothing, right? Like if I slow down and I make more time for my senses and I really allow myself to be fully present, if I do those practices, well, goodbye productivity, goodbye ambition. And my productivity and ambition have been such a defining part of my value in my life for so long that I was like, but
Mhm.
integrating them, as you were saying, like the masculine and the feminine, or having like the boundaries and that freedom of flow, like the yin and the yang, so to speak. We're talking about here, like this, we're not saying, oh, just pay attention to your senses 1000% of the time, like never focus on getting anything done ever, right? Like that's not what we're saying, but we are saying that they they can actually complement one another if we integrate them together. Would you agree with that, or would you maybe say that differently?
No, I would agree with that completely. Yeah. Yeah. And even just sort of how they can fuel each other, right? Because if you're slowing down, you're checking with your senses, and this doesn't have to be super complicated. It can be as simple as like I'm drinking my morning coffee or tea and I'm, holding the mug, feeling the warmth, feeling the steam, following it as it goes, right? That would take a minute, 2 minutes to incorporate that into your day. Which I know some people are like, not another thing. How can we make it as easy as possible? But I would say too, is like think about how much time each of us has probably wasted in the past chasing something just because we started,
Mm,
not because it was actually what we wanted or aligned with what our values were or what we wanted our next step to be. And of course, some of that's part of the learning process, but I also feel like at some point if we struggle to let go of things, like, okay, I took on this project at work because I thought it sounded really promising, but now I'm working through it and it's really just a huge time suck. It's not in line with my values. It's not actually going to get me further along in my career. It's not building community. It's not really hitting any boxes. People have a hard time checking with themselves and saying, okay, it's time to let go. So even knowing that, like, okay, now it's time. How do I know when it's time to let go? What does it feel like when it's time to let go? How can I support and resource myself in this process of letting go, which is really hard as well, too.
it's such a practice,
Yeah.
right? It's such
Yeah.
a practice. It's just one of those things that we can't just figure it out and then we're done with it. On to the next. And that puts us right back in the outcome box. And as I've said, and I'm sure I'll say many times, yeah, I have to keep checking in with myself. Often I've been doing this self-development work for a very long time. And I've known that I wanted to be a therapist since I was a child, right? Like I always knew I wanted to be a mom and I wanted to be, I didn't know it was the name therapist at the time, but a professional helper. Once I found out what a therapist was, I was like, yes, that's what it is. But still, I believe that till the day I'm no longer physically on this earth, I will still have some kind of area for me to learn in, to grow in, to heal in, to evolve in some way. And I have had to reframe my definition of success to
Mhm.
help myself see that that's actually more than okay. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
It's a
Hmm.
good thing. It means I'm not going to grow stagnant, right? Like
Yeah.
it means that there's always potential and possibilities for different or more, right? Like it means I'm not going to stay stuck at any point because there's always an opportunity for me to learn or to grow or something like in some way, and how that for me, if I'm staying open to that as best I can, that feels successful.
Yeah.
That feels successful if I'm doing it in a way that honors my own values with integrity. And keep coming back to those in a way that isn't like criticizing me or criticizing others, but allowing the space for grace to learn and to grow and to learn and to grow. Right? Like, and
Yes.
that's okay. But that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and never judging or blaming or shaming ourselves because like we said, this is the air we're breathing. That we live in a country that was, well, founded on unpaid labor. And and so it's very much in the ethos of our country is like work, 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 and don't care about who it hurts. Don't care about the relationship. Just keep producing, keep growing, grow up, keep growing up and out, right? But there's also a way to like grow down, grow roots, grow around, grow community, right? That I think are sometimes what actually makes our life feel day to day more fulfilling and more enriching. And sometimes when we're rushing so much and growing up without the base, we're also leaving a lot of things on the table, like a lot of relationships that could have been built by slowing down and taking that time. Like you slow down, you join a book club because you love books. You're like, okay, this is going to be my thing I do once a month. You meet your new best friend there, or you meet a new person who wants to partner with you on something, or whatever, a new travel buddy, someone to get coffee with. So that there are some losses that aren't advertised to us because of the culture we live in this constant striving, in this constant addicted to action sort of piece.
So true. So true. So
Mhm.
my closing question for you today then would be looking back on the life you've lived and even this conversation that we've had together today, how would you redefine your version of success for you?
Ooh, for me. Oh, this is such a good question. This is really again, I've been working on this for decades too. And even over this last year, really uncoupling because I realized in my dance, I was getting caught up on what things looked like. And I was like, this doesn't feel good. This doesn't feel good. So I think for success for me would be slow and sustainable.
Hmm.
For sure. That's definitely words that keep coming up for me recently. It's like, how can I make this sustainable? I don't want something that's going to be a flash in the pan. I want something that's, like you. I've loved talking to people since I was a kid. I was like, I want to do this when I'm 80. So how do I, how do I keep in this game? I want to be pole dancing when I'm 80 too. So how do I create sustainability? Sustainability, and I'd say a big value for me is community. I think I've mentioned that a lot. And as I said, New Orleans is very much that kind of vibe, but how can I not only make things sustainable for myself, but sustainable for everybody? That kind of like lifting water lifts all boats kind of vibe. So how can we create that together and kind of create this new vision of the world that is rooted in peace and growth and support for each other, and move away from some of the fear and chasing that we've been doing.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Definitely something I think for each of us to sit with and consider what that brings up for ourselves too, and the way that we want to redefine success. And also that it's okay if you are in this evolving phase of redefining success. I certainly am. I'm open. I try to be open. I'm not perfect at it, but I try to be open to kind of redefining what success looks like as I learn new things, as I experience new things, as I grow in new ways, as I heal in deeper ways. My definition of success may evolve, and I'm grateful for that now, rather than making that mean something bad or wrong or inadequate about me in some way. So I love what you shared, and I think that we can all take something home
Yeah.
from that to
Yeah.
explore within ourselves.
Yeah. And it's in my goo era. So I might have an answer for you in a few months too. That's completely different. It's based on this exploration.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
So, Eleanor, folks that are really loving your vibe, loving what you're sharing, or maybe just super curious about what you do, what you're up to, where can they find you?
Yes. Okay. So if you want to go on Instagram, to find it's mostly my pole stuff at this point. So like pole movement, coaching, mindset stuff around that. That's embodied_L. So embodied_ELLE is my Instagram. For information on my therapy practice, which is geared towards perfectionists, people pleasers, and sex workers in Louisiana and soon to be Florida, that's going to be groundedhealthnola.org.
Awesome. Anyone that wants to check out Eleanor and her work, head on over to those sites. It sounds like there's so much richness there for you to tap into, and that maybe will inspire something within you that allows you to feel more successful in your day-to-day in a way that's really meaningful to you. So again, Eleanor, thank you so much for being here today and for sharing your time with us.
Yeah, thank you, Tony. This was great. Thank you for talking with me.
No, I loved it. I loved it. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. Everyone that's joining in, if you're joining us on YouTube, go ahead, be a part of the community. Hop down to the comment section, questions, contributions, any way that's going to help you to meaningfully engage and support yourself and support others. Go ahead and do that down below. We love cultivating community here too, just as Eleanor was just discussing. Until next time, everyone, go out, feel successful in a way that is fulfilling for you. And I hope that ripples out and makes positive effects in the world. Bye, everyone. Links related to this episode can be found in the show notes section. Want to submit questions about success, satisfaction, healing, and relationships, health, or work? You can do that free and anonymous at drtonywarner.com, where you'll find other resources there as well. Did you benefit from this episode? You can subscribe, like, and share with another to pass it on, because anyone can listen on the go with this podcast audio available on all major podcasting platforms.